Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of Jumah Nights. As we said last week, we're going to be having our series with regards to the topic of Bara, and this week we're going to be talking about a really controversial topic, something that's divided our community in many aspects with regards to public Bara. Whether we should be showing our dissociation from the enemies of Ahlul Bayt in a public manner, and in the second section we'll be speaking about the importance of posting sensibly online. So just before we get straight into it, make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube and you followed us on Instagram. So with regards to public Bara, this is something that requires a lot of detailed discussion, something that our scholars have written a lot about. But today what we're going to do is we're going to take some small examples from the history of Islam, from the Quran and from the Ahadith of the Imams to see what picture we can get from our limited reading. So we're going to discuss this matter through the following points. Number 1, examples of praiseworthy Bara'ah. Number 2, examples of Bara'ah that was not sanctioned by the Quran, Ahlul Bayt and the history of Islam. Number 3, is public Bara'ah therefore something that Ahlul Bayt sanctioned or not? And number 4, what is Mudarat and how does this play into our image as Muslims and as Shi'a of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam? If we take the example of this ayah in the Quran, verse number 4 of Surah Al-Mumtahana, what do we find that Allah says? Allah says in verse number 4 of Surah Al-Mumtahana, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قَدْ كَانَتْ لَكُمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ فِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ. Indeed, there is a great example for you in the Prophet of Allah, Ibrahim. وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ إِذْ قَالُوا لِقَوْمِهِمْ. And those that were with him, when they said to the people of their time, إِنَّا بُرَآءُ مِنْكُمْ وَمِمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Indeed, we have disassociated from you and that which you worship other than Allah. كفرنا بكم وبدأ بيننا وبينكم العداوة والبغضاء أبدا حتى تؤمنوا بالله وحده. They say that we have disbelieved in you. كفرنا بكم. We have set ourselves aside from you. And from this moment, بدأ بيننا وبينكم العداوة والبغضاء. That between us there is but enmity and hatred forever. حتى تؤمنوا بالله وحده. Until you believe in Allah by Himself. So what is this ayah showing us? This is showing us a level of bara'ah that is praiseworthy. Allah is saying that this is an example that I've given for you. The example of Ibrahim and his people when they turned to the people that lived at their time and they said that we've completely disassociated from you and between us now there's only enmity and hatred until you believe in Allah by Himself. Now, this is something where you may be thinking, surely this has a context, and you're right, this does have a context. When we say that here, Allah has made Ibrahim an example for us, when we think of Ibrahim, this is not the only act of bara that he did. Ibrahim was known to smash the idols. Yeah, he was known to go and actually smash the idols that the people of his time used to worship. And he used to do that for good reason. He used to do that so that he could guide them, so that he could show them that these idols are worth nothing, right? And to show them that in a rational manner, right? This is one example where Allah has praised public bara'ah. And we're going to get to context later on so that it can make a little bit more sense to you. Then we take a look at a hadith in Al-Kafi, narrated by Rasulullah, where he's speaking about the concept of bara'ah and to be public in your bara'ah. So we're reading from page 665 of the edition of Al-Kafi that I have, which includes the first and the second volume. But in the original and more well-known copy of Al-Kafi, the reference would be volume 2, page 375. So Dawood ibn Sirhan narrates from Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam that he says that Rasulullah said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إذا رأيتم أهل الريب والبدع من بعدي فأظهروا البراءة منهم. He says that Rasulullah said, if you are to see people of doubts and innovation after me, then show your disassociation from them. فَأَظْهِرُوا الْبَرَاءَةَ مِنْهُمْ وَأَكْثِرُوا مِنْ سَبِّهِمْ. And increase of your insults of them. وَالْقَوْلَ فِيهِمْ. And speak of their bad qualities and make them known. وَالْوَقِيئَةَ وَبَاهِتُوهُمْ كَيْ لَا يَثْمَعُوا فِي الْفَسَادِ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ وَيَحْذَرُهُمُ النَّاسِ. It says here that Rasulullah says, وَبَاهِتُوهُمْ. A lot of the time, some people, they translate this part of the narration in a wrong way, that they say that this means to slander somebody. No, rather, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he means to say here is that you should expose the person using truth, of course, using proofs and using rational evidences to expose someone in such a way that it is known to everybody else that is watching. And then it says, do this so that they are not able to increase in their corruption in Islam, and the people are become aware of it. You see, this is the aim of this public bara'ah, showing your bara'ah and increasing in speaking about people and exposing them. The whole aim that Rasulullah is speaking about here is with regards to making sure that people are aware of the harm that this person can cause, right? And this aim is really important to keep in mind, because this actually sets the context for the public bara'ah that we are speaking about, that is praiseworthy, right? And we're going to read another narration that is going to clarify it even more with regards to who this is speaking to when it says to increase in their bara'ah and to show their bara'ah publicly. So it says, وَيَحْذَرُهُمُ النَّاسِ وَلَا يَتَعَلَّمُ مِنْ بِدَعِهِمْ. It says that the people would be aware of them, they would be warned of them, and they wouldn't learn from their innovations, right? So this is going back to the aim of this whole concept of showing bara'ah on a public level. If we take another look at a hadith, also in Al-Kafi, it's in volume 1, on the edition that I'm reading from is page number 43. This is another narration from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The narration says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إذا ظهرت البدع في أمتي فليظهر العالم علمه. If innovation is to become apparent in my nation, then the scholar, the alim, should show his knowledge. He should make apparent his knowledge. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَفْعَلْ فَعَلَيْهِ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ. And for the scholar, for the one who knows how to combat this innovation and doesn't do so, then Allah's curse is upon that man. So what do we get here? We get more context. When we're talking about public bara'ah, we had the example of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, who would break the idols of the people of his time. And he would do that in order to show them, in order to teach them, in order to take them away from their shirk. Here, in the first narration that we read, Imam al-Sadiq, he narrates from Rasulullah, where he said that so the people can become aware of them and they do not learn from the innovation of that person. And here Rasulullah, he summarizes all of those points, where he just says that once innovation becomes apparent in my nation, then it's upon the one who knows to show his knowledge. And it is that person whom it is needed for him to speak publicly and to expose it in the best way possible. Right? This is the kind of public bara'ah that is sanctioned and encouraged and praised that we find. And you can see that the line of thought is one, right? It requires a person of authority, a person of knowledge, and a person of hikmah, of wisdom, in order to carry out this noble duty. And that's why I want to take the example of a high-ranking companion of Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam, called Yahya ibn Tawil. Yahya ibn Tawil was somebody that conducted this wisdom of public bara'ah, and was somebody that did this with great effect at his time, at the time of Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam. Just so that we can take a closer look at the rank of this personality, I want to read a quick narration from Rijal al-Kashi for you. Rijal al-Kashi is also one of our classical books of hadith, and it has a collection of hadiths and with regards to each specific companion, and it's a really good collection of hadith which I would recommend everybody to read and to familiarize themselves with the narrators that are mentioned in it. So we find in the entry with regards to Yahya bin Tawil, we have a narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says, ارتد الناس بعد قتل الحسين إلا ثلاثة. He says that the people had apostated after the death of Imam al-Hussein except for 3. This is something that takes you back to and reminds you of other narrations that we have with regards to what happened to Islam after Saqifa, right? We find some of these narrations that say that all of the people had apostated except for a number of companions. And these narrations are also within a context, so please don't take them at face value. But I'm just reading this to show you the rank of this individual, Yahya bin Tawil. Imam Sadiq says that the people all apostated after the death of Imam al-Hussein, except for three: Abu Khalid al-Kabuli, wa Yahya bin Tawil, wa Jubair bin Mut'im. So these were the three that Imam Sadiq says they didn't waver even a little bit. These were the high-ranking Shia of Imam Sajjad, and at a certain period of time, the only ones really that could really push the message of Tashayyu' at that time. And what's interesting also is one of the people that is mentioned here, Abu Khalid al-Kabuli, the reason for his Tashayyu' was actually Yahya bin Tawil. But that's actually a longer story that we don't have time to get into. But this is just to show the rank of this individual, Yahya bin Tawil. What does Yahya bin Tawil do? We find this narration in Al-Kafi with regards to Yahya bin Tawil on page number 667 of the edition that I have. And this narration is specifically found in volume 2 of Al-Usul Al-Kafi. So, Al-Yaman bin Ubaidillah narrates here, he says, رأيت يحيى بن الطويل وقف بالكناسة ثم نادى بأعلى صوته. He says that I saw Yahya bin Tawil in the area of Kunasa. This is an area in Kufa. And he was shouting at the top of his voice. What was he shouting? He was shouting, معشر أولياء الله إنا براء مما تسمعون من سب عليا فعليه لعنة الله ونحن براء من آل مروان وما يعبدون من دون الله. He said, O people, we are in disassociation completely from that which you hear. What did they hear? They're hearing the curses and the insults of Amir al-Mu'mineen at that time. Man sabba aliyan fa'alayhi la'natullah. He says, whoever curses Ali, Amir al-Mu'mineen, then upon him is the curse of Allah. And we are completely disassociated from Ali Marwan. He's saying this very clearly with regards to the political structure at his time. He's going into the streets of Kufa and he's shouting it at the top of his lungs that we are sending curses upon anybody that insults Amir al-Mu'mineen, and we are completely dissociated from Al-Marwan and that which they worship other than Allah. So here he's made a complete statement against Al-Marwan. He's saying that they're actually worshipping other than Allah. He's called them mushrikeen. He's cursed them for insulting Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, and he's come with this level of public bara'ah. Some of the other narrations mention that he used to walk into the masjid of Rasulullah and he used to recite that ayah of the Quran that we went through with regards to the example of Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says that between us and you now there is just enmity and hatred. And he would take the example of Nabi Ibrahim in smashing the idols of his time, right? And that is the example of Yahya bin Tawil, a high-ranked companion of Imam Sajjad, who went out and he showed public disassociation from the political structure of his time. Now we'd like to move on to examples where public bara'ah has been discouraged and has been spoken against by Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. Then we want to come to a little balance to see what is the Ahlul Bayt's idea of public bara'ah and public dissociation. When we take a look at the Quran with regards to examples where Allah has spoken against a level of public dissociation, what do we find? We look at verse number 108 in Surah Al-An'am. Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. He says, and do not insult those who call upon other than Allah, lest they may insult Allah in enmity in response to what you have said, right? And we see the Imams actually using this. This is a very Meccan understanding, a Makki understanding. At the time of Rasulullah, when the idols were being worshipped by the people, Allah gives this ayah. He says, don't insult them, lest they may actually insult Allah in return. And you don't want Allah to be insulted in return. This is something that's showing us that we're actually responsible for the consequences of what we say, right? You curse them and they curse Allah back. You're responsible to a certain extent for provoking that person into cursing Allah, into insulting Allah. And where do we see that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam use this specific concept? We have a narration from Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam. It's found in originally Ayun Akhbar al-Rida by Shaykh al-Saduq, But I'm reading for you from the 26th volume of Bihar al-Anwar because I don't actually have Uyun Akhbar al-Rida. So we find that Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam, he's speaking to one of his companions, Ibn Abi Mahmud, and he's speaking about the narrations that have been added into the corpus, and they are fabrications, and these are narrations in fact that the Imams dealt with in their time. Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam and Imam al-Jawad, and the later Imams, they very much dealt with these reports to ensure that they don't remain in our corpus. So what does Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam say? He says, after he explains the categories of different narrations that have been placed into our books as fabrications and the effect of each of them, he speaks about a third category, which is narrations with regards to the deficiencies of the enemies of Ahlul Bayt by their names and with clarity, right? He says, in these narrations, the enemies of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ have been mentioned by name, and this is something that the Imam disapproves of. He says, وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا مَثَالِبَ أَعْدَائِنَا بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ ثَلَبُونَا بِأَسْمَائِنَا. He says that if they were to hear that the enemies of Ahlul Bayt and those who the opponents may consider to be noble figures and those who they love, if they hear that their deficiencies are being mentioned by their names, then they will speak against us by our names, right? And this is the concept that we were mentioning in the Quran, and the Imam actually goes on to quote the same verse. He says, وَقَالَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. He says that Allah says in the Quran that do not insult a people that call upon other than Allah, lest they will insult Allah in return in enmity without knowledge. So this is where Imam al-Rida, he gives a solution to Ibn Abi Mahmud, right? He says, يَا ابْنَ أَبِي مَحْمُودٍ إِذَا أَخَذَ النَّاسُ يَمِينًا وَشِمَالًا فَالْزَمْ طَرِيقَتَنَا. He says, oh Ibn Abi Mahmud, when you see the people going right and left, make sure you stick to our path. فَالْزَمْ طَرِيقَتَنَا فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ لَزِمَنَا لَزِمْنَاهُ وَمَنْ فَارَقَنَا فَارَقْنَاهُ. He says, for the one that stays true to us, we stay true to them. And the one who moves away from us, we move away from them. So this is where the Imam, he's given a middle path to Ibn Abi Mahmud. So the Imam, he's giving him a very balanced approach. He's saying that when you see people going right and left, stick to our path, right? And our path is the middle path, right? And we find that in across generations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. If we take another look at an example where it seems that the Imams have not shown public disapproval of the enemies, it is in a very familiar piece of literature to all of us, which is Ziyarat Ashura. We have here in Mafatih al-Jinan, where we can read from, there's these lines that we are all very familiar with. Yeah, we see that the Imam, when he is cursing, when he is sending curses upon those who oppress Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, how does he mention it? He says, Allahumma khussa anta awwala zalimin bil-la'ni minni wabda' bihi awwalan thumma al-'an al-thani wal-thalitha wal-rabi'a. So he says that, oh Allah, I ask you to specifically curse the first oppressor with a curse from me, with damnations and curses from me, and begin with him first, awwalan, the first of them, ثم الآن الثاني, then the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one. Allahumma الآن Yazid خامسة. And he says, and curse Yazid as the fifth one. والآن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجانة وعمر بن سعد وشمرة وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. So you can see here that the Imam, he chooses to name some of them and some of them he doesn't name, right? So why does the Imam do that? We can see that the Imam here, when he says curse the first oppressor of Ahlul Bayt and the second one and the third one and the fourth one, as a Shi'i, you already know who these people are, right? When you hear these words, you know who these ziyarat are referring to, right? But the Imam, he chooses to keep it vague, and he chooses to keep it vague for a reason. He doesn't want for the public to be able to identify who he's speaking about or to provoke them. We also find this in another line of of Ziyarat Ashura is taking a very soft approach in mentioning the concept but not the individuals by name. The Imam says, فَلَعْنَ اللَّهُ أُمَّةً أَسَّسَتْ أَسَاسَ الظُّلْمِ. He says, may Allah's curse and damnations be upon a nation who set the foundations for this oppression. And we know who those individuals are as Shi'a when we hear these words. But again, the Imams didn't do tasrih. They didn't mention these names clearly. And the Imams did this for a reason again, to ensure that the public are not able to identify who is being spoken about, while the Shi'a are able to identify it, right? So this moves us on to our third point. Did the Ahlul Bayt then sanction this practice of public disassociation or not? Because we've been through examples where we've seen that public disassociation has been praised, and we've also been through some examples where we can see clearly that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ are against this practice, right? We've seen the examples of Nabi Ibrahim smashing the idols for praiseworthy Bara. We've seen Rasulullah speaking about the one who has knowledge about innovation, being there to show his knowledge to combat that innovation. And we've looked at the example of a high-ranking companion of the Imams, Yahya bin Tawil, and his show of public disassociation. On the other hand, we have the verse of the Quran where Allah says, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهُ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. He says, do not insult those who call upon other than Allah, lest they insult Allah in response, in enmity, without knowledge. And we have the narration of Imam Rida, where he says that if the people were to see that we had spoken against our enemies by their names, then they would speak against us by our names. And he recited that verse of the Quran. And then we see this example in Ziyarat Ashura, where the Imam is not mentioning the names. So what do we find here? It's clear that there are contexts, and there is a hikmah, there is a wisdom which is deeply rooted with regards to this concept and where it should show. So the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ have taught us a balance between these two ends of the stick. There are some situations where this practice of public disassociation would be allowed, and some contexts, and for some people, where this would be encouraged even, and other contexts and situations where this would not be allowed at all, and the Imams would have condemned it. I've said this multiple times, and I'll continue to do so. The lofty manhaj of Ahlul Bayt and their strategy is complex, and it is not one-dimensional. The Imams have a very complex structure with regards to their mission and their aims, and how each context is dealt with in its place. And this is what hikmah is, right? Placing everything in its correct place. And that's why today I'm not here to tell you what you can do on a legalistic level. I'm not able to give you a fatwa and a blanket statement, which no one can give, right? In terms of a blanket statement, there isn't one that exists for this topic. This is something that depends on context, and it depends on the situation that we are in. And to overshadow this concept of public bara'ah, this is where the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ stressed a lot on a concept known as Mudarat, where Mudarat is essentially defined as making sure that we are able to balance with regards to people that are outside of our school, and show them a level of leniency and to ease them in, right? And to bring them closer towards us and be able to be among them also as normal people, where we can coexist and have a level of tolerance towards each other. So we're not provoking them and they're not provoking us, right? So this is the idea of Mudarat. If we take a look at the Quran, Allah says in the Quran in Surah An-Nahl, verse 125, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Id'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'idati al-hasana. He says, call towards the path of your Lord with wisdom, bil hikmah wal maw'idati al-hasana, wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan, and argue and debate with them in the way that is best. Inna rabbaka huwa a'lamu biman dhalla an sabilih. Indeed, Allah is well aware of those who have misguided and deviated from his path. وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُحْتَدِينَ, and he is well knowing of those who are guided. So Allah here, he's saying that call towards the path of your Lord with utmost wisdom. Make sure that you are doing this in a way that brings people closer to your religion as possible. Do not provoke people. Use the best ways and the softest ways to make sure that they are able to come towards you. So the hikmah sometimes would be, in one context, it would be to destroy the idols, to be very clear and public in your dissociation. In the situations of Nabi Ibrahim and Yahya bin Tawil. And in other situations, we take the example where Imam al-Rudha, he said that if you were to curse them and speak against them badly by their names, then they would speak against us badly by our names. And that is the position of Mudarat, not making clear that which is your belief with regards to certain individuals in history in order to ensure that you're not provoking people. Right? But at the same time, you have to ensure that the balance is there whereby you're not just hiding things for no reason at the same time, right? If someone asks you what you believe and you have judged the situation and you can see that this person is an understanding person and nothing bad may come out of this and he just wants to know more about your beliefs, it's very fine for you to say from a very historical perspective in a non-provocative way, these specific individuals, we don't agree with them. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. But on the other hand, you have people that provoke and provoke and provoke. What do you expect if you are to take that approach with somebody? Are they going to come closer to your religion or are they going to move further away? And this is why the concept of mudarat is so heavily emphasized. And what's really important to note here is that these two paths, that we have on either end of the stick, the hikmah can only really be ascertained by the fuqaha, by the scholars. They are the people who are able to tell us, is it the time to smash the idols or is it the time for mudarat? Is it the time for tolerance and coexistence and being soft and lenient? These are the concepts that we are discussing here are very complex and they require a lot of thought, and there are a lot of layers as to which end of the stick the hikmah falls in. And that's why the fuqaha and the scholars are so important in determining this in our time. We have these narrations about mudarat and the concept of keeping lenient with the people of our time. We have a narration from Imam Sadiq narrated from Abdullah ibn Sinan. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أمرني ربي بمدارات الناس كما أمرني بأداء الفرائض. He says that my Lord ordered me to have mudarat, to be lenient and to have a soft way of bringing people in, a balance with people, the same way that he ordered me to complete my obligations, my prayers, my fasting. This is the level that we're speaking of mudarat at. Mudarat is such an important thing and it's an obligation, right? And this is where we see this understanding of balancing the way that we speak to people in order to ensure that we're not provoking them and also we're not hiding things for no reason, right? You just have to be able to pinpoint the exact specific ways in which we need to act in specific situations. That's why we have a lot of rulings from the scholars with regards to specific incidents that may occur in which sometimes someone may provoke another people, another sect or another group of people, and the scholars will speak against it, right? Because they feel that in that specific moment, the hikmah was not to do what they did, right? And in other situations, we'll find that there are also rulings and fatawa with regards to la'na and salawat, where they are showing the fadl and the importance and the merit of la'na, right? So this is where the rulings of the scholars are very important and the hikmah of the scholars is very important. And it is not for anybody to take any context and say, in this context, I think I should do this, right? This is where we are required and it is necessary that we follow the opinions of the scholars with regards to public bara. So to conclude with regards to public bara, the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ allow and sanction public bara in certain situations, and in other contexts they do not allow it. This is with regards to the hikmah and the wisdom of what is necessary at any given moment, which we can find out from the fuqaha and the scholars of Islam. Even in the cases that we've spoken about public bara'ah, it's been in the context of giving people knowledge and warning them and bringing them towards the truth, right? The Imams don't agree with people who just go out of their way to provoke people and make them angry by sending la'na on people that they love in front of them for no particular reason, not for the reason of bringing them towards the religion. And that is not a smart way of trying to attract someone towards tashayyuh and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt anyway. If you were to go to someone and without explaining anything, just say, we curse this person that you love, how do you think that person is going to feel? How do you think you would feel if someone was trying to bring you towards another sect of Islam, for example, and they would come to you and they would curse Amir al-Mu'mineen in your face? How are you going to feel about that person? You, instead of even thinking of maybe what he has to say about his religion, straight away you're going to be thinking, I need to fight this guy, I need to spark him in the face, for example. So there needs to be a level of understanding of the situation and the context in which scholars have given rulings. For example, there may be a scholar who is in the political arena who, for whatever reason, feels that in his position, the wisdom is to not show any level of dissociation from the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. And in another extreme, we may have a scholar who is growing up in a community where he feels that the Shi'a children themselves are growing up now not knowing the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, not knowing the difference between the haqq and the batil. And for that reason, he shows a level of public dissociation. And that is within the hikmah of the scholars, right? Neither of those people can be blamed. There needs to be a level of balance and an understanding of the context in which these people are operating. And it is not for any of us to go to someone else and say, this is not an acceptable level of Bara, or this is an acceptable level of Bara. It's not for us to dictate. So in short, we need to be sensible in the things that we say. We need to maintain that middle path, as Imam Rida said to his companion, that when you see the people go right and left, make sure you stick to our path, the path of wisdom, and have the goals of the Imam in front of you whenever you come across this topic. Whenever you think of saying something that might provoke someone, think that the Imam is there and he's listening to you. Would the Imam want you at that point to do that? Are you taking people away from the mission of your Imam? Make sure you have these questions in your mind, and above all, make sure you refer to the opinion of the scholars that you follow with regards to this particular matter. So for this week's Jumah Reflections, we're going to be speaking about how to post sensibly, how important it is that we post sensibly on social media. And that links in with what we've been speaking about today. With regards to public bara'ah, this is something that has actually caused a lot of tension for Shia online. As the time goes on, and this is something that I've actually grown up with as well. I've obviously been on Twitter for many years, so I've seen the generations come and go. Obviously, the people that are on Twitter already know that each generation comes and they speak about the same things over and over again, right? People, the generation comes, they talk about public la'na, they'll speak about the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, they'll speak about tatbir, they'll speak about the general topics that you hear over and over again on Twitter, right? And once that generation is gone, they will like grow up and get married and then jump off Twitter, and then you'll have the next generation come and they'll talk about the same stuff again and again. And I've seen, literally, me as a 26-year-old, I've seen 4 cycles of that, right? So I think I've seen like 4 generations come and go on Twitter. In each generation, you always have that one guy, yeah, who literally, he takes it to the extreme, yeah? Every time you'll see him post something that is so provocative towards the opposing sect that it's going viral, and there's people speaking against the Imam of our time from the opponents. They're cursing and insulting the Imam of our time. They're cursing and insulting Shi'a. And to be honest, when you look at this as a grown person, right, and as somebody who was in your position, right, this is not me saying that, you know, I'm in some high place and, you know, I'm speaking to you as if you're children. No, I was once in the same position, right? We all grow up on this hype on Twitter, right? And you've got Shi'a Twitter, and you're like, okay, cool. Like, you know, I'm gonna post these ahadith. I'm gonna impress my friends and all the people on Twitter so they can see like what I've got to say. And sometimes we get carried away. We're out here and we're posting stuff that is just not like it's not necessary and it's not needed with regards to the image of the Shia. Because even when we are on Twitter, yeah, Twitter is a reflection of who we are in real life. Yeah, social media in general is a reflection of who we are in real life. So we need to make sure that if we're posting on Twitter, we're posting sensibly. We're posting that which the Imam of our time would be happy with, would be pleased with. And that's something that you're going to learn with time, right? You're going to become more and more sensible as you grow up. When I was 14 or 15, I would probably be listening to someone like me and what I'm saying right now and be like, you know what, bun this guy. He's obviously an old man. I'm 14. Like, I'm having fun with my friends. This is what we're doing. We're on Discord. We're having fun. We're, you know, exposing the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, and we're doing such a great work for the world of Shi'ism. But, you know, like, let's be real, right? You got to be real with yourself, and you got to know and ask yourself in the depths of yourself, right? Is this something that the Imam of my time is happy with, or is he not? And that is the sole question that you should ask yourself every time you go to post something on social media. Will the Imam of my time be happy with this or not? And that is advice to me before I give it to anyone else. And I hope to always have that at the front of my mind whenever I post anything on social media. So I hope that's been a beneficial episode for you. The first section with regards to public Bara and being sensible in what we post on social media. I hope that I'll see you again next week. Make sure you stay tuned, where we're going to be having our last and final episode with regards to the series on Bara, where we will be talking about Bara in our thought processes, in our methodology. So I'll see you again next week, inshallah, for that. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.